So here we are ready to start on the rules of Tanto Monta. It is a beautiful day. It's about a week out from Christmas. It's 60 degrees, sunny. I mean, there's clouds, but it says partially cloudy. Usually when it says that, it's like the sky is gray. I don't know how they get it so wrong, but today, yeah, it was just perfect out. So I went shopping. Didn't absolutely need to, like I usually push it to a horrible place, but even though bad things happened and my body can't take it and I'm just wiped out from it. But I'm a little bit invigorated by the fact that someone actually posted, "Can't wait till you get to the rule." Because usually when I post an intro, it's, you know, a little overview, and then I jump in and go through the rules and all. I know this one's going to be a pain in the ass, just because the rules left my brain while I was looking at all the special cases. So I've got a little bit of time, and I figure I'll start going through it. This is a Here I Stand based game, so for the most part the map has spaces on it that correspond with Here I Stand, and honestly, if you haven't played Here I Stand or Virgin Queen, but Here I Stand is the better place to start by far. Better game too, but you probably shouldn't be going for this one. Right? But maybe this is a topic you're really interested in. So keys are these square pieces, and those are tracked specifically on the victory point tracks. Fortresses are going to be, if they're in your home country, the color represents who controls it. If it's outside your home country, use these little control markers. These are also used in the rest of the series. The difference here is that in unfortified spaces, we have ones that are important for victory points for everyone, which are these triangles. And so the game had to introduce triangular control markers. I had the camera set up for something else. Oops, that's a Portuguese. Not if I flip it back over. These triangular markers to indicate those. You've got to keep a count of all the triangular markers on the game. Somebody suggested using some kind of cubes or something just to kind of make them pop out a little better. It's probably not a bad idea. If I find myself having to recount the victory points regularly, that's going to be an issue. These are not triangular spaces, I think. I don't know what the fuck they are. Maybe they become triangular. Because it looks like a triangular space with a circle around it. So I think those are victory point spaces that are kind of conditional. Maybe once Naples falls, they become victory point spaces. I don't know. We'll see when we get to that special roll out of all of them. There are independent spaces on the game. The circles are just unfortified spaces with no particular value. You can gain control of them, and you kind of have to for your lines of supply. Political control is marked with control markers. A space is controlled if it started out as home, or if it's an independent space that you've seized and you'll have a control marker in it. If it's a home space of another player or another power that you have grabbed, or if it's a home space of an allied minor power that hasn't fallen to another power. When an ally minors to you, when a minor allies to you, you gain control of it. I don't know if you get a marker. I know you do with keys, but I'm not sure if you do with other things. We can see. See, I don't have a marker there, but I wouldn't need one. Here, I have a key marker for that nation, but if I flip it over, there's a French key on the other side, because that's part of their force pool of total keys, of total square spaces that they can control. So here we talk about the control markers. What do you have to put them on? The Berbers and the Sultanate shares the same control marker as both kingdoms from the North African Alliance, which is one major power. Some have different shields on both sides representing powers controlled by the same player. The Spanish their two powers share the control markers, and so there will be other countries like Portugal on the other side of them. The square ones are used to show control of keys. Every key on the map has to have a control marker on it unless it's independent. These are not yet in play, so don't worry about that particular one. This is a caravan. It looks square, but it's not a key. And all the square control markers have to either be on the map or on a player aid card. Now, there's a weird thing that could happen. You win the game automatically if you get all your square markers on the game, but I'm not sure what happens if you lose one of these named ones but run out of these. I feel like you could end up controlling a territory that you will not have enough counters for. And it's not a matter of counter mix, it's a matter of you're only allowed as many square counters as are on here. I'm not sure if that special case is covered in the game. I don't recall it being so. It's the weirdness of having these named ones that you must have in order to win the automatic victory. But like, you could run out of these, and then I just don't know what happens. Because normally the game would end if you've used up all your square counters. And that's how Here I Stand works, right? You could lose a home territory and have a key somewhere else in that. The triangular markers are used for the strategic spaces. You don't need them for home power, unlike the keys. And they gain victory points, helping them win standard or domination victory, but not automatic victory. Automatic victory is simply getting all your keys on the board. There's no limit. Did they say the limit there? See, they say here there's no limit to the number of spaces a power can control with triangular control markers. If they use all their markers, improvise unused ones. There's no such statement on keys. But I'm not sure what happens in that weird state where you have one of these uncontrolled and then you've used up all of these, whether or not you can capture another key. The hexagons are just control markers for fortresses and symbol spaces. Now, sometimes fortresses will give you a victory point or something, and that's what these are for. Okay. There are some home spaces on the board that have two colors. And we'll zoom into that one. That's like Spain and the Castilian Civil War. Beja something or another. Joanna. One at the top, one at the bottom. These spaces are home spaces for two different powers. The space is initially under control of the bottom of the space, and that'll be the player who controls it if there is no marker in the space. Now you will notice that the revolutionaries or whatever control all of the split spaces initially in both Aragon and Castile. I don't know if anybody else has any. I think they're the only ones with that problem. Well, you got Algiers, but that's a neutral space to begin with. And I don't know if it's completely out of play. It may be like Tunis, that you can go seize it. But it's kind of weird because these are not gray, so they're not like, so I think it's actually out of play. Anyway, we'll get to that. That's right here under one of the sets of special rules. They're not all in that 1/3 of the rule book. Beltranejos. Ah, yeah. So there's Castile and the Nazarids are also have some split spaces, and those are in Castilian hands at the beginning, which feels weird, but it's appropriate. If either player controls those spaces, they can use them with all the benefits of a home space. Have we hit home spaces yet? No, we haven't hit the rule for that yet. The basic there is that you can build troops in your home keys, and troops can withdraw back to home spaces and stuff like that. Well, we'll get to it as we hit. There are spaces with dual color coding in the Kingdom of Naples. Are there now? Yeah, we got this gray-brown in there. Okay, what's up with those? They show the home color on the bottom and the independent gray color above. These become independent at the death of Ferrante. And again, we don't have a discussion yet about why there's a circle and a triangle in those spaces. So, we'll see. The Berbers. In North Africa, there are 8 light green spaces belonging to the Berbers. These spaces enter play on turn 4. Before that time, they're ignored. When they enter play, they're treated as home spaces of North Africa, except for Algiers, which is independent until the play of the Algiers Regency. Okay, so that's what's up with that. Yeah, I should have realized that. Okay. The lines indicate connections, but a dashed line indicates a mountain pass. And you'll see there are dashed lines in the Canaries. So some of those mountain passes are really water transits. Over here too. Land units moving over a pass will cost 2 command points to move instead of 1 command point for the formation. Passes have additional effects that block spring deployment of land units. They prevent interception by enemies across the pass, and they inhibit land units' abilities to control adjacent spaces and remove unrest in adjacent spaces. You may retreat or avoid battle over a pass. Seville is a port, even though it's inland, but only if Jerez is controlled by the player who owns Seville or by someone who allows him access. The Strait of Gibraltar has these weird port things on it. This little circle of white dashed lines. There are 3 spaces, Ceuta, Gibraltar, and Tangier, which are ports on kind of both sides of the Strait of Gibraltar. And there's pass connections linking them, which work just as if they're real mountains. Land movement is possible across the connections only if the moving power controls or is friendly with either the origin space or the destination space. That seems like that would be obvious, but you have to pay command points in some cases to get control of spaces. A number of CDGs have used this kind of mechanism. You move into a space, then you pay to get control of the space, then you can move out. But you could just move through the space and leave control as it is. The Muslim player can treat both connections as one-way connections. 1 CP movement point cost, possible interception, possible spring deployment, if he controls Gibraltar. However, in this case, these connections are only considered normal connections for the Muslim movement, including spring deployment and interception, from Tangier or Quetta to Gibraltar, south-north, but not vice versa. And again, there's going to be a special rule on this, in addition to this special rule on it. These special rules don't count against that 1/3. The main map has 9 sea zones. These are not the main map. Plus a 10th zone for the Canary Islands, which has a direct connection to Cape Bojador. And that's indicated up here. The boundaries between the sea zones are shown with a blue line. Only naval leaders and naval units can occupy sea zones. Land units can transit them on boats, but they can't sit in them. The Tyrrhenian Sea and Central Mediterranean are considered adjacent if you own Messina. Yeah. Or if you're allied with the player controlling Messina, or if the player controlling it grants you the right to pass through at the moment. The Alboran Sea Zone. Ooh. Not a term I'm used to, but it's considered adjacent to the Gulf of Cadiz if you control one of these 3 ports, or likewise have an ally or someone who lets you through. If the use of these passages are denied, movement between the sea zones is prohibited when lending naval units or returning them to a controlled port in winter. If a passage is granted at any time during the turn, you retain access between these zones for the remainder of the entire turn. I think that's for the entire set of sea zones. We're going to be pausing soon because it's almost raid time. Many of the spaces near the coast have a port symbol. That'll allow them access to the sea zones they're adjacent to. You'll see some of them have multiple ports on multiple sea zones or whatever. And that'll allow you to go to sea. It also has some effect on sieges and whatnot. There are 2 boxes. The English garrison. I don't remember where that is. I got a whole pile of troops. Yeah. The English garrison is over here on the French card. And the Paris space on the map. That may contain military units but are not valid targets for events. Foreign war cards are also considered to be special zones that cannot be targeted by normal events, although their combat and response can be played to impact them. What will happen is a card will be turned over, played as an event or whatever. It creates a foreign war, and that becomes a space, not really on the map, but that troops and stuff can be assigned to. All right, the exploration map. All right, there are 10 ocean zones on this map. We're not going to count them. 8 of them contain exploration map spaces where players may build a commercial settlement. It's these things. Some of those spaces are special color. Those are only for Portugal. The boundaries between oceans have red or blue lines between them. I think the red line has to do with Tordesillas. Particularly treacherous passages, such as crossing the Atlantic or Indian or sailing around the Cape of Good Hope, have arrows going across the boundaries to indicate the danger. Naos, I'm going to call them caravels. I don't know. I want to, because this is a term that is unfamiliar to me. That cross these lines have to roll 1 time on the navigation table for each arrow, each roll running the risk of damaging or sinking the ship. And I'm going to have to swap batteries on this. I hate doing it. But the navigation table is over here, and I don't think anywhere else, but everybody has a copy of that. I'll be back in a moment. Anyway, whenever you cross that line for any reason with your Naos, little exploration ships, you have to roll on the navigation table, but there are modifiers to it. Uh, Terra Incognita. Each time a player attempts to move a nail into an ocean zone they have not yet explored, that player must roll on Terra Incognita to determine whether the zone is successfully explored. A and B contains only oceans. Should be a Pacific Ocean. There's a lot of Pacific missing. I guess, well, circumnavigation wouldn't have happened yet. Okay. And therefore no settlements can be established there, although they're otherwise subject to terra incognita exploration rules in the normal way. Each ocean zone on the exploration map has a box that holds VP markers. And those are where you put them is indicated, so like B is on that. That's C zone B. They're awarded if you gain victory points on the Terra Incognita or cartography tables. These two awards may not be claimed by the same player. So you can explore an area. If you're really successful, you get a counter unless you already have one. Some of the areas have only one counter each, though. On turns 1 and 2, Portugal is the only power who can move nails, but he can only establish settlements in the spaces reserved with the Portuguese color. This restriction goes in turns, so that on turn 1 he can only move nails and create a settlement in Ocean Zone 1, and on turn 2 he can only go into Ocean, or he can also go into Ocean Zone 2. If he has the School of Sagres, Henry the Navigator has been played. Portugal is not restricted on these turns and may sail up to Ocean Zone 3 and may freely establish settlements in any of these 3 zones. Note though, he has to take his reserved spaces before he takes another space in that zone, because no one else is allowed to go into those. Also crossing the ocean zones A, B, 7, and 8. A, B, 7, and 8. Okay. Or the crossing of Indian Oceans 4, 5, or 6 is only allowed once the overseas voyages has been played. The lines to first enter these sea zones are shown in red to remind players of the restriction. Are they now? Oh, okay. I thought it was Tordesillas, but it's not. And it wouldn't be, because that's like Brazil there or something. Okay. We are going to halt there simply because it's time for me to play Raid. Raid and the other gacha game that I'm playing right now have been really eating up my time, which is part of why it took me so long to read the rules for this, and part of why it's taken me a long time to get anything out. They both are running Christmas events that are making me want to play, like making me feel like I'm compelled to play a lot more than I want to. Get some nap and a whole lot more video enslavement. I'm able to be back up here. I got Raid playing by itself, which it can do just fine. The other game doesn't know how to do that. All right, let's look at the different powers. We've already kind of talked about this, that each player basically has 2 powers. Okay. Has 2 major powers that they own. But, so the Muslims have the Nazarids and the North African Alliance. Portugal has Portugal and Beltranos, which is a limited major power, one of the revolts. Castile and Aragon both count as Spain. They kind of work more as a single power, but there are limitations on what you can use each for. And France has Catalonia and their revolt. The limited major powers, well, honestly, the only player who has I think, 2 diplomatic sets for them are the Nasrid and the North Africans. They talk about the limiteds don't have that. Well, the Spaniards share a foreign policy as well. So the rebellions and share a foreign policy with their major power, and the 2 Spanish powers do. The 2 Muslim powers, once well, they're both in at the beginning. One is North Africa, which includes the Berbers, and one is the Nasrid, who are expected to disappear. So, but they have their own foreign policy. There's a series of minor powers: Navarre, Florence, Naples, Genoa, Venice, and the Papacy. And these can end up allied to players and then basically used with the major power they're allied with. Each player has a ruler who's printed on their player aid card, and that'll have some information on it, an administrative rating, and a charisma. And both relate to cards. The administrative rating is how many cards you're allowed to save between turns. And this is a fairly small number, and it can also be used to modify the result of the headline event roll. We'll see about that. Basically, all players roll off and add a bonus. For each point committed, subtract 1 from the ruler's admin rating that turn, and put a -1 admin rating on his ruler card. So basically, you're allowed to commit some of your capacity to hold cards for a bonus in getting control of the headline. The Muslim ruler Boabdil, we're going to call him Tom Bombadil from now on, because that's what he looks like to me, has a base admin rating of 0. However, his attribute raises to 1 if the Nasrid power currently controls Gibraltar. He is not in the game yet. And in fact, because cards are on a per-player basis, each major power doesn't have a card. Each player has a single ruler who will handle their things. Now, the charisma is how many cards you're dealt at the beginning of each turn. And there are modifications to this. Muslim and Portuguese can have their charisma value reduced by 1 if they lost control of 2 home keys of their own. Some rulers also act as military leaders. They'll have a leader counter who has the same name. They are treated as 2 completely separate things. So the ruler could be, like, the general part of the ruler could be captured and languishing in a prison. I don't think they can die in this game. Or whatever. It's also possible that maybe some card removes the ruler card. I don't know about this. I'm just speculating, but leaves the leader on the board. They're treated as 2 completely different people. Okay, on the player card, you have a list of all the possible actions that player can do, and this is different by player. Some of it may all be the same. Most of it may all be the same. If you look, the size of everything except these purples, it looks like the purple is the only differential, just by size. But the costs may be a little different. So for example, here, recruit cavalry, but Nasrid cavalry are less. So there's some helpful little bits that, you're going to want to look until you get used to or whatever. Initiate piracy, but a special expenditure after the Treaty of Tordesillas. All kind of little cute things in there. The initial ruler card, we just talked about that. There are cards that will replace that. Bonus VP box. You're going to get a lot of these VP chits, and they're going to enter and leave your box, and they'll also be recorded over on the track. There's a dungeon where any captured military leaders you have will go until they leave. Available fortress holds 2 fortress markers that can be used to fortify simple circle spaces on the map. I find this kind of weird. We'll see how that works out within the rule itself. It seems to be a limitation, but you may get more or something throughout the course of the game. You have a warehouse, which has your resource markers in it. And all the resource markers that are in play at the beginning of the game are 2 CP, which is sort of the minimum value you can get from one of them. That's set by the scenario. An automatic victory track, once you clear this off, you've won the game, but there might be restrictions. For example, with the Portuguese, you have to clear, you have to be holding all your home spaces. I think that's the case with everyone, except for the Spaniards. The Spaniards just have give me a big territory. I don't care what it is, right? These look kind of like they're in that same place, but this is to track something to do with the Nazarids, and it has nothing to do with the other side of it. Used home cards. That's these spaces down here. You put them there, I guess, face down or something. I'm storing the cards there in that area just to help me remember that, because the rest of the cards just get dealt out, and I didn't want to do that yet. The player card also contains customized information. So, for example, we have a piracy track here somewhere. They have, I thought they have something, well, they have like the English garrison. There's a couple of treaties on here. Oop. And then these, I don't know where they go when they go, but I've got them stored there. There may have been instructions to put these 2 on the board. I don't remember. I don't have my my setup book up here. I'm trying to read through the history, although I haven't been doing very well because I had a newspaper. Okay. The different military units. The leaders. Like I said, the leaders have a battle rating on the top value and a command rating on the bottom. The battle rating is going to be, their initiative value in terms of it's their value in terms of making interceptions, withdrawals. It's also dice for battle. The command rating is how big a force they can carry. Now, formations are defined as follows. And you can move a formation, a normal space, for 1 CP. The first kind of formation is up to 4 pieces. You don't need a leader. The second type is if you have a leader present, you can use the command rating of the leader and throw an extra cavalry in, and as many artillery as you like. Artillery don't count at all. Now, you could use some of their command rating for additional cav. It's just they get a free cav in addition to their command rating if you have cav with you. And if you have 2 or more leaders, you can take the 2 highest rated leaders' command ratings and throw an additional commander in. So you can have quite a large force. Ferdinand and the Great Captain may not combine their leaders. By the way, I know I had a question about who the Great Captain was at one point. I see why they're using that as a label. In EU, it's Cordoba. But his name is, his first name, maybe his last name, de Cordoba. And, he's not really known by his last name. It's kind of an interesting factor in this. Last names are kind of weird here. So like Columbus, and I had to look this up and then found it maybe in the rules or in the historical notes as well. But there's this leader listed as Casanova. Well, I wanted to look him up because I'm like, Jesus, that's a lot like Casanova, but he's from a much later period, isn't he? And I go look this up, and yeah, he is. But this guy is Casanova de Cologne, or something like that, Casanova Cologne, Collon. I'm like, whoa, that's very similar to Christopher Columbus. Columbus is not how he was referred to in Spain or Italy, as far as I know. Cologne, Collon, he apparently took from this guy. He served under him, and then he ended up starting to use his last name, or whatever it is. So very, very weird. Anyway, I don't know. People change their names nowadays, don't they? All right. Army leaders and siege artillery are never counted when determining the size of the formation. They can carry them along. Formations cannot include units from two different major powers. Now, I guess that includes limited major powers, except, lots of special rules, the Nasrid kingdoms may command a combination of North African and Nasrid units. Ferdinand or the Great Captain may command a combination of Aragonese and Castilian units. Anjou can command a combination of French and Catalan units, and Alfonso V can command a combination of Beltranejos and Portuguese units, which absolutely makes sense because he's essentially, I think he's married to the heir and would essentially become king of the Beltranejos faction. If you can command units from more than one power, you have a color differential on your counter. So, for example, here, Alfonso, he's got a tiny little corner of green up there to help remind you. That could be part of his hat as far as I'm concerned. I wish they had done it a little bit more clearly. Two home cards, the Crown of Aragon and the Rise of France, allow single leader formations to make a special move. There are several rule sections that also allow single leader formations to remain in a specified space during winter. The capacity of such a single leader formation is limited to the command rating of just one leader, plus one additional unit. Other leaders can accompany the designated leader, but they do not contribute to the size of the formation. Then there are naval leaders who will have a little anchor on them. I believe there's a land-naval combo leader somewhere. I'm not sure. I would want to, you know who I would want to say? I would want to say it's Vasco da Gama. Right? No. Oh, geez. Who is he? He's the Portuguese guy, the big one. Albuquerque. He's the one. He counts as a dual leader. There are a few of them in EU, and he counts as that there. Anyway, we shall see. We shall see. So they have two numbers, perhaps. One is the battle rating, which is going to function very much like a land combat battle rating, but it works for ships and piracy. Well, sorry, not piracy. And then there's a pirate rating, which a few of the naval leaders have, and this is going to be extra dice that they get when they are initiating piracy. Remove a naval leader from the map if there are no longer naval units present, and he comes back to any home port under friendly control at the start of the next turn, which might cause him to be removed again. The Naus. These are your explorers for the new for the the greater world map. And we have some limitations there, but we have a lot of words too. They're added to the exploration map with the construct a nao action. I don't know how to pronounce this. It sounds Portuguese to me. It's like Jao. Yao, I don't know. A single player may never have more than two of these on the exploration map, although he can have any number in the built box ready to go exploring. Place them on their front after they're constructed. Their rear will be a reduced side. They have a couple of numbers on them. They have a crew rating, which is a modifier to any other die roll that the now has to make. This is kind of in the wrong order, because the piracy is extra dice on piracy attacks on settlements. The number C is a modifier for any other die roll it has to make. It's the crew's ability to survive voyages, to do cartography, all that. The back will be a damaged side, and they're flipped to this side if they take losses while undergoing navigation or terra incognita, or when pirating. The cargo capacity is 1 resource if it's damaged, 2 resources when it's not. Oh boy, I'm already tired. It's making me want to eat. Okay, so we've gotten through like 8 pages out of 63, and this is like, you know, we're not really hitting much of anything. And this is how I felt when I was reading it too. I'm just like, oh my God, I know how much more there is, and it makes it really, really hard. So there's 3 types of land units in the game, all with circular pieces: infantry, cavalry, and siege artillery. Only Aragon and France have the latter. They come in numbers. They can be used as change, but the counter mix is a strict limitation. This is the same in Here I Stand. And it can cause some real issues because you might have to juggle to try to get things. Now, you have some restrictions here. If you don't have enough small denominations to make change for a combat loss or event card, you lose additional units from the space where the combat or event occurred. You can't, like, remove them from other places and whatnot. But you can make change from other places. 2 types of infantry. There's regular infantry, who have, and here they talk about it. It's like regulars have a multicolored unit symbol and a solid stripe across the bottom of the counter. Okay. I kind of see, I mean, it's like the solid stripe appears to be the land the guy is standing on, but it's a horrible way to describe it, but whatever. They don't tell me much else about them. Militia. These are non-professional troops often recruited. They have a solid black unit symbol. Okay, that's pretty clear. They're found on the reverse side of regulars. These units, while cheaper to construct than regulars, may be disbanded in the winter phase and are subject to the effect of certain cards. Oddly, though, they don't talk about a solid stripe underneath. But they look exactly the same, except that they have a black image, which is just like, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? Why did you talk about the solid stripe thing? Because the cav have that, the artillery have that, I think. I just don't know what they're trying to say. Like, don't talk about the solid stripe if it's no different from any other unit. By the way, the weird units, these guys. Somebody pointed out that these are, and it's really weird, they have the same number on both sides, which would be fine if they were militia on the other side, but they're not. And everything else, I think, well, not that. Okay, so there's some special cases. But anyway, somebody pointed out that those must be the Ottoman, that those are the Ottomans, and that makes sense because it's the only Muslim unit. Ottomans are the only people who would have an X on them. But I don't recall seeing anywhere in the rules where it tells me that. It doesn't talk about, you know, the different nationalities of the pieces and how you differentiate them. And boy, it would be useful if they said Ottoman on them like every other minor in the game does. As it stands, they just look like North African bowmen. And except they do not have a militia side. Now, is this a big deal? No, it's not something you'd want to replace counters for or whatever, but it is the kind of thing that with the amount of playtesting and everything this appears to have gone through, it's kind of like a... But there aren't a lot of places where I ran into stuff where I'm like, oh, that was a mistake. The big mistake was in the decision to design this game. Because it's just an overloaded design choice. And that's a matter of tastes, right? Like I said, Virgin Queen is too busy for my tastes. I think this is going to be maybe worse from what I've heard, because people who like Virgin Queen find this too busy. But then there's people who are like, this is actually the best of the series, you know? It's a lot more subtle. There's a lot going... by subtle, I think they mean busy. The same damn thing. that you have way too many choices to keep your eyes on. Anyway, these units are cheaper to construct than regulars. Yeah, okay. The numerical value on the piece shows the number of troops represented without any kind of like scale being given to you. So I don't think it actually is the number of troops. I think it's a whole bunch of things factored in and thrown together. Siege artillery, the number of units represented by this counter. Okay, instead of before where it says it's the number of troops, now it's the number of units. Only Aragon and France have this type of unit, and they're effective only on assault rolls against fortified spaces. Siege artillery can never count against the unit limit of a formation. But for each artillery unit in a formation, there must be an infantry unit. If you have fewer infantry than artillery, the excess artillery cannot be moved or used in an assault. If they're forced to retreat, the siege artillery in excess is eliminated. And finally, cavalry. These allow you to avoid battle or intercept the enemy more easily, and they're important weapons in field battles. They can basically throw an extra set of dice, I think. The numerical value shows the number of cav units represented. Okay, again, not cav troops. I'm being silly here. These are troops. These are the number of troops, but these are units. Now, you could argue a single artillery is a unit, but I don't feel like you could say, I don't know. I just don't know. But anyway, the point is you can't break them down smaller than ones, I guess. I don't know what I want them to do. I'm just being in a really picky mood because I'm reading through the entirety of the rules, it seems. Okay, they have a multicolored horseman unit and a solid stripe across the bottom. So the solid stripe comes back on the calf. Again, I don't see any of this on anything else. It just feels weird. They fight like regulars in field battles and can decide to charge. However, they're ineffective during sieges. The first cavalry unit in a leader's formation does not count against the limit. You can choose to dismount cavalry, swapping it to a regular of the same power, even just before combat, but this action is irreversible. The only reason you'd want to do this is probably for a siege. Anywhere else you wouldn't. I really want to stop. All right, naval units. I really want to stop. I'm hungry and just not enjoying. There are two types of naval units, squadrons and corsairs. We have squadrons on the board here, and I think they're all squadrons, aren't they? Well, this may be a corsair because it only has one start point. Do we have special corsairs for? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Let's see. Rectangular pieces are used to represent naval units. Each naval unit is always a single group of naval vessels. There's no denominations. The numeric value on the counter shows the number of dice rolls in naval combat and the number of enemy hits required to eliminate it. The color around the number shows which power owns the unit. Naval units from Spain always move and fight as a single force, so they're depicted with colors of Castile and Aragon. They won't have any limitations. In the table below, most powers receive naval units, but in a very limited number. Some of these powers can build both naval squadrons and corsairs. The type of unit in play is depicted by which side of the counter is face up. Okay, let's take a look. Here we have a North African Navy unit. Black on the other side, I bet you that's a corsair. I thought the other side was the damaged side, but you can see this corsair is that. Okay, so North Africans and Nasrids can choose to build naval squadrons or corsairs. I think they're supposed to start off as squadrons at the beginning of the game. Most other players can only build squadrons. Tunis Jerba can only build a corsair. The Ottomans in the Ottoman-Venetian War, which are three counters with the little crossed swords, can build three, but they can be either naval squadrons or corsairs. For the most part, the only people who can build the corsairs are, well, I would say across the board, are the Muslims. However, you can conduct piracy with regular naval squadrons in certain special cases. Ship with white sails, the numeric number is the number of dice it gets in combat. Yeah, so I thought they flipped to be a damage side. Corsairs they have black sails because they're from Umber. And the numeric value on the counter shows the number of dice it rolls in naval combat and the number of enemy hits required to eliminate it. Same with regular naval squadrons. They're the only naval units that can initiate piracy on the main map without being at war with the target power. Spain and Portugal can initiate piracy during the Peace of Alcosolves with naval squadrons, and French naval squadrons can also pirate as long as they're accompanied by Casanove. All right, we're breaking there because my battery's almost out, and I am hungry. Another dry day today, and we go out for a walk or whatever. It's Thursday, about a week before Christmas. No wonder now. Just to get feelings in place. Yeah, we're going through this kind of slowly, no question, no question. Cards, okay. So each player has 3 home cards. They may not always have 3. I think only the Spaniards always have 3. But the other powers are able to pull them in. And anything exciting about this? Essentially, okay, any player other than Spain, if they happen to have 3, when they play their second one, they have to discard their third one. So they're only actually allowed to have 2 in their hand, sort of. But they have the flexibility of which 2 up until they play the second one. These can be played either during the action phase, and they can be played either for their ops or for their events. And I say events because all of these, well, not that one, I think, have like multiple events that you have to choose among. I don't know how much of that is common in the normal decks. I'm a little less concerned about multiple events on the home cards because you're always looking at those home cards as a particular player. Whereas if you're handed a new card with like 2 or 3 options on it, it becomes a lot harder. You already have enough difficulty between do I play for the ops or do I play for the event. And I say ops, it's CPs in this game. Home cards are limited in terms of where their CPs can be spent, no matter whether you choose to use it for CPs or otherwise. They can be used with units to construct units from the major power associated with the home card. Recruiting, you can see here. And the following actions can only be carried out if at least 1 land unit from the power associated with the home card participates: moving, assaulting, fighting, and naval transport. I don't know what the whole flow of actions are, but one thing that's noticeable is anything you have, that's one of these special actions, that's not included in your home card, even though it feels like your home card should be allowed to do those. I'm not sure if they're actually saying that. If you choose to play it for CP or the cards event, many actions are... No, I think... I think construction can only be home country, and these move and fights have to include home country. But I think you're allowed to do other things. Let's see. This limitation per se... my first impression was those are the only actions you can do. But it doesn't actually say that. So I think you can do any action, but if you do those actions, they're limited. This persists even if a resource is expended to extend the impulse. All other actions available to the player on the player card can be performed without limitation. Okay, it does explicitly say the home card Tanto Monta, Monta, Tanto is associated with both Castile and Aragon, so it is not subject to this restriction. That's a little weird because that means then you can move just forces of minors. that you have under your control. And I don't know if that's intended to be under the other side of things as well. I doubt it. Once used, the home cards are placed on the player's card, not on the discard pile, to show they're not available until they're dealt again. They can never be taken from a power's hand when a random draw is required, or when a specific card is chosen. If the power is forced to reveal his hand, he must also show any home cards that he's holding. As long as he has a home card in hand, he may not perform a pass action. But honestly, you should know which home cards he's holding. Cards with the name of the card in red and the word mandatory or mandatory? No. Yeah, we're skipping a few words just because it makes life easier. Just a little bit. Mandatory events must be played during the action phase of the turn in which they're drawn. They could also be played as the main card of the headline event instead. And then they would be gone before you got to your action phase. When executed, the event is always resolved first, then the playing power receives the 3 CPs listed up here. So you don't have an either or, you have do the event and then get the points. That's going to be hard to remember just because the shield looks like it's an option. Mandatory events can never be held from one turn to the next. You cannot pass in an impulse if you have a mandatory event in your hand. These may be removed from play after they occur or remain in the deck on a turn-by-turn basis. Indicated. Some events are automatically executed at the end of an action phase for certain turns. You may have to dig it out for information that's on the card. You are going to be reshuffling the deck, I think, every turn. So, cards with the name of the card in blue and the word response printed on them are response cards. These are playable as an event in the action phase during any player's impulse, including in your own. Play of a response card interrupts a player's impulse, a battle, or an event card play. You should allow time for a response to be played at any time. My feeling is you probably rewind because you don't want to. Does anybody have a response card? I moved a piece. Does anybody have a response card? I moved another piece. Or I moved that piece again. Response cards can also be played for CP during a player's impulse if the player does not wish to use their special ability for an interrupt. These are going to be a pain in the ass for me. Simply, whether I'm playing solo or not, they're problematic because it's hard to remember that you've got these and you get kind of distracted. You're not like, unless you're like constantly staring at your hand thinking, I'm going to play that if somebody gets something. I'm going to play that if somebody gets something. And then, you know, you're pretty much telegraphing you have a response card if you do that. What I tend to do is I generally have learned to place them face up on top of my hand of cards so that I know who has response cards, because you can play them even if you're not involved, really. And this will be a little easier with only 4 players. Most of these games have 6, so. Combat cards, if they have a black banner with the word combat on them, they're combat cards. They're playable as an event during a field battle, assault, piracy, or naval combat in which the card's owner's units are participating. Very important. Why? Because I thought this wasn't the case. If you don't have it that way, then other people can use basically the choice between these points, which they would use on their own country, to some event that they have no control over, really, which always feels fucking weird to me and kind of like magic. I thought it said otherwise somewhere else. The combat card is played just before the battle is resolved. Combat cards can also be played for CP during a player's impulse if they don't wish to use the special ability. Cards that say no event in brown must be played for CP. These cards all have a base CP of 6, which is what they give. They have a higher CP shown in parentheses, though, in case they're used in as an advantage for for the headline event, as the booster for the headline event. So they become more valuable for that. Oddly, they do have information on them, but it's just historical information, it looks like. A little confusing, but whatever. Normal event cards. These I'll have no flag up on top, or no banner on top. They have a point in an event. You make a choice between one or the other. You can play it as a headline event, or as a backup. The Papal Bull card, France starts with it because they start owning the papacy up here, or over there. It does show it as well, but I don't feel like zooming in on that shit. This is a normal event with special properties. If the current ruler of the papacy is associated with Portugal, Spain, or France, this card is given to that player at the start of the turn. Okay, it can't be given to the Muslim. The card can never be drawn by another player, nor can the player choose to pass while holding it. It's very much like a home card, and it has multiple capabilities. The deck. Cards available to each power each turn consist of their home cards and a variable number of cards dealt to them. Yeah, and also whatever they held. The deck is reshuffled each turn after any new cards for the turn have been added and before cards are dealt to each power. There's a big pile of cards over there that give a sequence of turn-by-turn additional cards, starting with turn 2, because if they're in turn 1, they're in the original deck, and none of them are labeled as turn 1. Add them to play at the start of the card draw phase of the turn specified. Home cards are added on the specified turn and given directly to the appropriate power. All other cards entering play are added to the deck before new hands are dealt. I'm being good, by the way. I'm doing my laundry. After a card is played, it's either removed from the game or placed in the discard pile. Cards removed from the game after they're played as an event where the text says removed from deck if played as an event, or if the text removed from deck after some condition appears and the condition has been satisfied. Cards are always placed in the discard pile if they lack the removed from deck. Event cards with this text are also played in the discard pile if they're played for CP rather than as an event, or if the condition listed after removed from deck is not met. One of the cards in the game, Tanto Monta, Tanto, can be exchanged for a card selected from those currently in the discard pile. There are a few restrictions on these retrievals. You can't take the Papal Bull, which honestly I don't think should be in the discard pile. It's going to be confusing if it shows up there because you'll end up reshuffling it, so I would set it aside. The Plague, nor any mandatory event may be retrieved from the discard pile. By the way, the fact that it says the Papal Bull is in there, to me that means if no player has the papacy associated with them, it gets shuffled into the deck, which I would not have thought. I would have thought that this card just goes to the player. Card remains in play each turn and is always awarded to the Christian player who is allied to the papacy during to a Christian player who is allied to the papacy during the card draw phase. I think it gets reshuffled into the deck if no one can get it. Ah, fuck. Okay, didn't bump anything important. Right. So you can't take any of those cards from the discard pile. You may never retrieve a card from the discard pile that you played earlier in the turn. Hard to remember. For ease of memory, you might want to play your discards in front of you and keep them there. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to be too confused to handle that as it stands, but you might want to. I'm going to probably end up violating this rule simply because I won't be able to remember that I played a card, who played the card. And this would only affect the Spanish player. So, you know, you could like put the Spaniards discard separate. I don't know. The recovered card cannot be played as an event in this turn if it's already played as an event before in the same turn. Again, a hard thing to remember. Damn it. You know, I don't know why you'd play the Tanto Monta Tanto, a 6-point card, to retrieve another card that's been played as an event. Forming the deck for a turn. All cards in the discard pile are reincorporated back into the deck during the card draw phase. These are combined with the cards that were not dealt during the previous turn and any new cards entering play. And so a lot of shuffling of those armored cards that are painful to shuffle. I hurt my knuckle yesterday on the woods trying to make my way through with groceries or to get groceries. And that's going to cause even more problems than usual. Okay, hold on. We got a specific here. The cards that were not dealt during the previous, the new cards entering, never include the card Papal Bull in the deck. Instead, award it directly to the Christian player that currently controls the papacy as an activated minor power ally. It is possible that there is no minor power, that there is no Christian ally to the papacy, though. So it shouldn't go in the discard. It should say set it aside instead, which is what I would do anyway, because it's really unlikely that that the Muslims control the papacy. But if they do, and they do it by conquering Rome or something, if they do, it means that card does not go back in the deck, which makes me happier. That's what I would think it would be, but I could see where, it's sort of a real wild card that's kicking around. Resource counters. So I've got 2 cups of resource counters. The caravans, which are really just, which are not all players. And honestly, the overseas, which probably are not all players either. Although all players have the opportunity. They have a value of the resource, which is either a replacement unit, a card, victory points, or command points. At the start of the game, you shuffle them up. As resources are spent during play, set them aside with their values revealed to form a discard pile of resources expended that turn. These counters will be mixed back into their pool as part of the card draw phase. A little annoying. I would rather just throw them back in the pool immediately, but whatever. If during the action, and I may end up doing that accidentally because I don't feel like it makes that big a difference. If during the action phase, well, you know what it does? It makes it harder to get the victory point ones because those do not get expended. Those just kick around. So as the pool gets smaller, throwing the CPs and the extra cards and extra units and whatever back in would actually make any in-turn draws less likely to give a victory point. So there is an effect to it. I don't know if it's enough to really worry about, it's not going to impact balance terribly much, I think. I don't know. Okay. So, how do you get these? 1 naval resource is removed from the pool and placed on each settlement in the card draw phase. There are no settlements at the beginning of the game. That's these things over here. Not these. Those are part of the main map, sort of, kind of. Let's see what else we have. A caravan marker is placed on Marrakesh and Fez. We have those already. And later of turns 1, 2, and 3. And then 1 is placed in all 3 caravan boxes. Okay. The other, starting after turn 3. Players can check the back of the resources at their settlements or caravan boxes at any time. So this is a little weird. I kind of understand, I know what my settlement is, but the caravan boxes, it says, who owns the caravan boxes? Well, these are caravans going to the Muslim player, so I'm guessing he's the only one who can peek at those. Because the goal of the other players will be to cut the caravan and make it unlikely to arrive. Naval resources can be received directly to the warehouse on a player card from some special sources. The French player from the French Mediterranean trade or North Sea trade tables, which he rolls on every turn. The Spanish player succeeds on a roll on the Mesta table, again every turn. And there may be cards that give you additional rolls. The player that controls Ragusa gets to roll on the Ragusa table, and it's got a big pile of forces on it, which is probably too big. Again, I haven't allocated those. When a Now moves into the Now's built box after successfully gaining a resource through privacy, it'll be carrying that resource while it's on the map. But when it goes back into the is it the returning box that I said? No, into the Now's built box. Okay. I guess it's regular fleets that show up in the returning units box. I don't know. And for a roll resulting in an extra reward from a leader captured in their dungeon. And there's weird shit about captured leaders. I honestly don't really believe the way that's designed. But the way it works is if you've got an enemy leader captured, you can negotiate a deal to release that enemy leader. And the enemy will like give you a resource essentially, or a card draw, or some other diplomatic consideration in exchange for getting their leader back. Okay, that's fine. But if you don't make a deal, you roll and see, and you might get resources for having that leader just rotting in your dungeon. I don't know what that's meant to represent. But it increases the cost of, what kind of bribe you're willing to take to give a leader back, which is fine. I can understand that reasoning, that, it sets sort of a minimum to that, but it's like, yeah, is that leader really doing you any good in the dungeon? I feel no, but anyway. Resources arrive. There are two sources of resources in the game. Go to another set of rules for details on them. Okay, fine. Some of them come in the winter from settlements, caravans, through a trade in the seas, through the Mesta, and through Ragusa. The die roll ones. Well, also the settlements and caravans get reset. Some occur in other phases of the game. An extra reward from the leader capture in the dungeon, and there's a specific part of the turn where that happens. As a Now returns to the built Now's box, receiving a ransom payment. Again, these all happen at specific moments, although the Now may be able to return within the impulse phase. At the end of a Spanish impulse, if Spain is supporting the war in Brittany, and event cards sometimes award a resource. If they arrive outside the winter phase, they follow the same process in the reveal resources paragraph. I don't know where that paragraph is. I've got awarding, arrival. I don't have a reveal. Probably an artifact of something stupid. Of section 18. Oh no, it's back in that other rule that we don't have in front of us. And we will get to it, in a week or so as I work my way through this. The one exception is the gain one card resource. If that occurs, the player should draw the card immediately. Resources that provide CP cannot be stored from turn to turn, so those that are not spent must be discarded in the winter phase. CP resources remain in the player's warehouse until used to extend an impulse, pay a declaration of war, or pay for a ransom. Events, ransoms, and piracy on the main map force a player to have a card drawn out of his hand at random. If a player has a hand that consists of both cards and resources, the random draw could be either a card or resource, even though the text always refers to a card. Yeah, let's make that confusing. But limited space on cards, man. When the random choice is made from the target power's cards or resources, depends on the number of each of these two types in the player's hand. If the target has more cards than resources, draw from cards. If the target has more resources than cards, or an equal number, draw from the resources. I think your home cards count against you for this, even though they can't be drawn. which is problematic because I could have 2 home cards in my hand and 1 resource and nothing else. And then it would instruct me to draw a card, and I really can't. Obviously, I'll work my way around that. But it feels a little fucked up. Like, maybe it should say if the target has more non-home... You see, the eligible cards would handle it, because you can't take the home cards, you can't take the Papal Bull, and you can't take the mandatory events. So, right there, you're like, okay, there's a bunch of different things that, you know, could comprise creating a bigger hand. I think that's how I'm going to play it. It just makes more sense, but who knows. When paying a ransom, the player who is paying decides whether to give up the card or a resource. Now, this is the interesting thing. I think you only give up 1 card or 1 resource when paying a ransom. The imprisoning power will get the same thing either way, basically. I mean, the card and the resource might not be equally valued, but whatever. They're approximately the same. But when you ransom it off, you're not doing it through a deal. You can release prisoners through deals, but ransoming off is something I forgot about. Like, you're able to actually just pay to get your leader back, and you pay a card or a resource. And in a way, you're actually, I think, plausibly you could say you're reducing the amount of value that the person receiving the ransom is getting. I don't even know if it's random, but if it's not random, you can select a really bad thing to give them, like something that's not particularly valuable to you, or to them. And if it's at random, you might make choices based on what your hand is like. If you've got a powerful hand, you might not want to offer that up. Now, given that the player paying the ransom gets to choose whether it's a resource or a card, you may well have a shitty resource in hand. Okay. I'm going to hit the sequence of play next, but I am unready and incapable of continuing right now. Let's look at the sequence of play. There's going to be 7 or less turns if there's an automatic victory. And each turn is 7 phases. The 4th phase is the meat of the game. That's where the impulse is, the action phase. The victory determination phase is when you decide if a winner can be declared. But that's different from the automatic victory. There's like an early victory that can happen separate from the automatic victory due to having a lot of victory points, basically. Okay. Card draw phase, you add new units, suitors and children to the Catholic monarchs. I've got them all set up already, but some of them aren't available. Well, none of them are available until like turn 3, I think. Each player gets a fortress if they have a space for one. Okay, so here's, you can build 2 a turn is what the limitation is then. The Mesta marker gets placed. It's already set at the beginning of the game up here. You get your home cards. The Papal Bull gets handed out. You prepare the deck and deal out cards based on the charisma. Yeah. Plus other modifiers. Then there's a diplomacy phase, which doesn't happen on the first turn, which is kind of weird. Like, you feel like, okay, it makes sense, with new players that they would just play out what they've been handed. But it kind of feels like you should be able to cut some broad deals and stuff at the very beginning of the game. That just feels natural to me. Maybe it's from an Empires in Arms type of flavoring. But anyway, You hold negotiations and announce any deals that should be official. This is the only time you can walk away from the table and not hold discussions openly. You ransom. You pay a resource or a card to regain a captured leader. And then, if they're still captured, you make a roll, and you might get as good as you would get off of the ransom. Yeah, I mean, there's only a chance that you get a resource out of a leader who's languishing in your prison. And then you pay, and this is using resources or cards, CPs, to declare war. In spring, each player chooses an event card and a supporting card. And they reveal them. And I don't know the formula. We'll get to that a little later. But I think the supporting card is how many points are kind of backing that event card. And whoever put the most points, with a lot of modifiers to this, ends up having their event take place first. But all the events get executed. So I'm not really sure how much value there is in making sure your event goes first. It might end up collapsing a power or something where it's really important, but in general, I doubt that it's that big a deal. Naval squadron transfer. If you have an explored ocean zone, on the exploration map, you have the option to move a naval squadron. Okay, great. I think that allows you to exchange between the maps, but I'm not sure. Then each major power, and this is weird because Spain has 2 major powers, the Muslims have up to 2, Portugal and France have limited major powers. I think they can do it as well. Okay. So I think everybody has 2. So it's not that weird. May move one formation of land units from a home key to a friendly space that's free of enemy units. And there are restrictions to this. You have to have a line of communications and whatnot. Then we go to the main action phase, which is pretty much the same as in most CDGs. Each player takes a turn playing a card, spending the ops or the event. Okay, then you go to the winter phase after everybody has completed their card plays and passed. Mandatory events that have not been played that are required on that turn will get fired off and they'll get pulled out of the deck and whatnot. Military orders have a chance to reduce Corsair piracy, and Nazrid spaces, I think they have a capacity to I don't know what this is. Nazrid spaces that have lost their home characteristic. I don't know exactly what's meant to be there. That's probably going to... Yeah, we're going to hit that somewhere else, but I'm not going to remember the reference here. And there are very few references into the rules. I feel like this one, roll for military order reduction of Corsair piracy. Okay, sounds like I'm rolling for 2 things because and Nazrid spaces that have lost their home characteristic. I don't know of any place where military orders get to roll a die to do something to Nazrid spaces that have already lost their home characteristic. So I don't know what this refers to. This might be the time when they lose their home characteristic. This might be... I mean, they can also regain it, so I just don't know. Any unused resources get discarded. So I guess you have to reveal your victory points before now or you lose them. Interesting. So you can't really hide them. Remove lone naval unit markers. Those might have happened during diplomacy. The cards could also affect it. Check for deaths from plague. Remove plague markers. I don't think that's... I don't think leaders die from plague. I think just units. resolve the return of noble militia units to their homes. So militia, I don't know if there's a difference between noble militia and just militia. My understanding is the militia is basically the noble forces, but like that makes perfect sense for Portugal, Spain, and France. Not as positive it makes sense for the Muslim powers, but then again, that may be simply my not being as certain that their feudal levies work the same way, like that they had levies of the same sort. But I'm guessing that all militia, and that there's no distinction here, and the word noble is a waste, but maybe I'm wrong. Again, you know, that could be called out somewhere, and it just didn't stick in my head. But now I'm seeing the wording, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. Leaders, but it could just be reminding you that the militia are nobles for no reason other than just to solidify that in your head. That these aren't, you know, I don't know, like levies in the French Republic or something. I really don't know. There's some similarities, actually. Like they're not well trained for the most part, but some of them would be. Leaders and units, except in the Canary Islands, return to fortify spaces, possibly suffering attrition. There are some exceptions to that as well. And then, for some reason, there's a reference to Moriscos there. Well, I don't know why. One of the many special rules. Okay. So, what's interesting here, a bookmark in place, is there is a rule for winter phase for Moriscos, some of which has to do with giving the Nazrid control creating Nazrid home spaces, recreating Nazrid home spaces, creating more Morisco militia, and then dealing with the uprisings. I don't know if the Nazrid spaces that have lost their home characteristic is meant to refer back to that Moriscos, but it's kind of weird because I just feel like the Moriscos should have their own step. And it feels almost like that's gotten spread out and the reference has been put somewhere really weird. There's nothing about them returning to fortified spaces. That just seems like a random reference in a game that doesn't put references in, which is a real problem, actually. But again, you know, like, to me, that's a design decision was made not to fill the rules with too many references numbers because they could be all over the fucking place, especially in the sequence of play. But, yeah, I don't know. Each major power adds a regular unit or one cav for the Nazrid to a controlled home key. Berbers get a Corsair, may take a Corsair if they control Algiers. Okay, then spread effects of Morisco uprising. So all the Morisco rules aren't in here, but I don't know why there's a reference there. Return Naus to settlements or roll a navigation check to remain at sea. If they want to stay at sea kind of pirating, they might be damaged. Naval squadrons return to main map ports, receive resources from settlements and caravans. This is going to be a die roll for them to get through. Now, that means if you want to pirate the resources that are coming back from the settlements, there are two ways you can do this. You can do it through direct piracy actions or by just sitting at sea, and you will cause a possibility of an interception happening from the tables, if I recall correctly. Resolve French commercial relations, the Mesta, and control of Ragusa. I think, again, this is... See, those go directly back. This is what's weird, because, for example, the Mesta get placed in the spring phase somewhere. somewhere we saw the deal new resources is when the Mesta resource, as an example, gets drawn. It gets placed immediately in the warehouse. And there was another place where they told you where you put the Mesta. Place the Mesta marker was back here as well. So I'm not sure what's going on with this. Again, you know, these things, when I was just lying on my beanbag reading the rules to prepare, they were kind of a blur, and it's like, okay, I'm sure I'll get to that. But this seems in contradiction, so I'm beginning to find places where, yeah, I'm not so sure these rules are as good as I first thought. They all sort of made sense when I read them, but it could have just been that I couldn't find disparities because they're just so overburdened and there's so much there, and not references and stuff like that. And major power alliances, remove piracy markers. So piracy is generally limited. I think I talked about this at one point or another. When you do piracy, you get a little marker in the space, and that prevents you from doing it again in that space. I think you're allowed to do it twice or something like that in each space. I don't remember. And again, it's like, you know, with all this, I can't fucking remember what the game, like what all the mechanisms and everything are. It's going to take at least half a game, and this is a problem I have with some of these more overburdened games. At least half of a game, because they're not a very long game, to start to get into a flow where I kind of understand the game. Now, they suggest play a couple of turns before you actually get started. I'm going to just deal with the problems that are present. Because to me, I don't know, you know. It's a CDG, damn it. It shouldn't be a fucking mess that you can't grasp what the game is even about. And that's really the problem. Like, here I stand, felt like everything was understandable. It should be called Here I Understand. But everything that's come from it, Virgin Queen, that Time of Wars, no Ed Beach involvement in that other than having designed Virgin Queen. There might be another one that I'm not putting my finger on. It's all like, yeah, really, really hard to get a feel for what the game is even vaguely about by reading the rules. It just becomes this mess in your head. And I don't like learning curves of that nature, right? I mean, I kind of know what I'm supposed to do in terms of getting victory and whatnot. I just don't really have an idea how to affect that. And with, 2 powers per player and blah, blah, blah. Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm grumpy and old. Where did we get here? Okay. Diplomacy reset, including removal of the admin reduction markers, one of which happens, I don't know, there's something you can voluntarily do to reduce it. May have been boosting your headline event, but already I can't remember. We just did that, right? I'm only 13 pages in out of a 60-page rule book, and I'm already forgetting things that I've read within the last day or so, less than a day. And I've read it aloud, which generally tends to make things stick better. Marriage resolution phase for the children of Catholic monarchs starts on turn 3. They're not available before that. You resolve any marriages that happen. Check for French isolation, which gives victory points to the Spaniards, and then check to see if the characters involve Croak. Then victory determination, check for surrenders of Catalonia, Beltranejos, or Nasrids, each of which have special rules involving that. If applicable, award victory point markers for Catalan ownership of Barcelona, the Reconquista, or the Nasrid resistance. Some things, at least in the special rules, are being called out, but there's a whole lot that I think are not in the sequence of play. Check French victory points for Lord of Italy. If it's turn 7, roll for possible extra benefits for captured leaders. Checking for resources that award victory points. Okay, I thought you did that all the time, but I don't know. Oh, 7 is the last turn, so you're checking maybe for the next turn to see if you get a bonus. And then you see if there's a winner. If no one won the game, not through an automatic victory, but through a victory point victory where they exceed the 48 or reach 48 or are like 7 points or more ahead of an opponent, of the next opponent, they automatically win. Otherwise, you advance the turn marker. And we are done for a while. Didn't use up a lot of battery on this somehow, but there's only so much of these rolls I can take. Part of it is just knowing how much I'm wading through, and that was the case when I was reading them the first time. And they're, as you can see, at least so far, they're fairly procedural. There's a fair amount of text in there, but they're still a procedural, it's a procedural system for the most part, and I find the rules that are written with that in mind to be more difficult to stick. But on the other hand, the game is about playing cards and causing that to do things and everything, and so it's not like, well, here's the coherent system for diplomacy, right? There's not. It's all baked into the cards, and you can use the points to spend on diplomacy or to move your armies or whatever, just like any CDG. But I find, that attempt to offload some of the complexity into the cards, I think, is a noble design, but I also find it, when you start trying to make the games more complicated, very difficult to get any kind of grasp of what the game is really about, even after a first play. Anyway, back to my discussion on series and systems like CDGs in general, and how I lose my excitement for them as time goes on quite often. That may be a significant part of what's going on here, is that when I played Here I Stand, I was so excited to see something new. I'm not sure I understood the game on that first play either. I really don't. But it's not really a matter of trying to figure out how to put this. It's not like the core mechanisms were all that hard to grasp. It was that the interactions between what is due to happen when you utilize those core mechanisms is something that takes time to learn. And I'm a lot less excited when I'm pulling out another game in the same series that has a whole new set of sort of goals and intentions that I have to kind of discover. Like, that's just, I don't know, I'm not excited by the discover new things, using the same kind of mechanism, right? Trying to think. And I guess, again, if I look at the early coin games, while they had different victory locations and whatnot, they had the similar feel to them. And then when I start looking at the later ones that are getting more and more overburdened, they're also adding very different kinds of victory conditions to them that mean that the goals that I'm making for playing the game are changed. And I can't, while I'm using the same kind of tools to evaluate stuff, And you add to that the fact that, my operations are different and whatnot as well, that I have to learn those new operations. So it just keeps getting, I lose excitement as the newness of the design type goes away. And then I also grow, it becomes harder to learn the new things because the designs are getting more complex on top of that. Now compare that, I don't feel like the same kind of thing happened with more traditional series. Maybe I'm wrong there. I'm not sure. But I just don't feel like, I'll tell you this much. I don't feel like TSS and these tactical series has changed all that much over time in terms of having to know what I'm trying to do being more difficult, as well as the actual means of doing it becoming more and more complex and overburdened, right? And you could say broadly, wargaming as a whole added complexity as the ages went through, but I just don't feel too much like it's sort of an across the board, all kinds of things changing in the way that the CDGs manage to do, in the way that a number of other things tend to do. Generally, it's more the terrain and whatnot evaluates stuff. And because a game like this, kind of like EU, and it's hard to evaluate, like I can't look at EU and say, yeah, but the stuff that was derived from it was just so much more, adding more burden and everything. You could kind of argue that some of the mechanisms in EU are similar to some of the mechanisms, are derived from some of the mechanisms of other games, say Empires in Arms, for example. But it comes to just looking something up at the end in general, maybe not for the true shark play where you're trying to manipulate the peace conditions terribly much, but yeah, it comes down to, yeah, you're trying to do well, and if you think you're doing pretty well, that's the time you take your piece. EU felt very simple with that. Empires in Arms a little less. There were times when you're doing well in a war, but not quite at a certain level, and you can see that pretty quickly. And I would say the similar thing happens with the EU, except that you're more penalized for being at war in EU. So you want to win the war quickly in both games, really, and get it over with, get your points from it, whatever, and get out. But in EU, it's really, really important to the extent that you're more willing to take, kind of a white peace type situation, just because you're screwing your country over by being at war. But it doesn't feel like, the same game or the same kind of system that's just been more and more burdened with different kinds of goals, and it may be that they're just so much more different, right? That's the argument between those two games would be, oh well, they're both I go you go games with area conquest and similar kind of combat systems, sort of, kinda, and with a peace negotiation that's based on your current situation that gets you bonuses that you pick from a menu, right? That's sort of the only. But there's so much more to both games than that, right? But here, a lot of the core mechanisms are the same, and it's just like there's huge amounts of chrome added to this. And there's a fair amount in Here I Stand. And also, all your goals, all your victory point locations have changed around and everything. I don't know. It's just I can see where that would be appealing, but I'm just getting stuck in this. Yeah, you've made it more overburdened with special rules in Chrome, and there's just a completely new like goal to the game, and that's part of like Virgin Queen did that to me. They all are doing that to me, where it's like the first one was worth investing the time to play that second or third time and enjoy, and therefore, you know, I had a better view of it. So like the first time I played Here I Stand, I walked away from it probably with a feeling of, I need to play this again because I don't really get what I was doing. Like, I maybe played by the rules, but I didn't get what I was trying to accomplish. And now I have a better idea towards that, so I can go for that. But when I'm getting to this one, yeah, it's not, you know, what I'm trying to accomplish is different, and there's a whole lot more complexity. Now compare that to the 18XX games, which also change, you know, they add some complexity as they've gone, some of them stayed simple, and blah, 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 but I've got, in general, my goal is the same thing. Hook up rail lines to make lots of money early on, reinvest that money and keep making it snowball for me, and you know, you could argue, well, instead of money, you've got victory points you want to gather. Yeah, but this would be as if, you know, the ways I get money in an XX game are all different from different games. You know, instead of running my rails and connecting cities and counting stuff, getting me my victory conditions, as it were. You know, one of them is like collecting sets of cards or something weird like that. You know, you've just got like this whole new set of things you're trying to do. Your goals have changed. The things that generate your victory points have changed. And, well, they're not an engine either. There's no way to take your victory points and snowball them, but that's fine. That's something actually kind of against most economic games, is that like, whatever you made, now you're in the lead and you've got more, so you can invest more and get a better rate. You know, you might get the same rate of return, but you're going to constantly stay ahead of people, and that distance is going to grow. Anyway, I don't know why I'm babbling about all this. Mainly because I want to chatter about games and whatnot, but I really don't want to face these rules, damn it. Well, here it is, Friday morning, kind of late in the morning. I don't know exactly what time. I woke up around 10 a.m., I guess, or maybe an hour earlier, and have probably wasted an hour since then. But Raid is off playing itself. I got to get more sleep today, but I figure while Raid's busy doing what it's doing, we can do the card draw phase, and maybe a bit more. All right. Use the phase to add counters during play. We had the new people based on the turn. Army leaders, what turn they're what turn somebody shows up or is removed is listed on here. All other leaders are on event cards. I hope I'm pretty sure I saw something. Yeah, the leaders and rulers is on there. Because that would be a bitch to remember. It's still going to be hard to remember. There's so many little steps and everything, but, you know. Cards might change things about leaders. The new leaders or returning ones are placed on any controlled home space in priority of key fortress strategic space. If none of those are available, you leave the leader on the turn track and try again. When a leader is being replaced, you replace him in the space that he's in, unless he's captured, in which case the replacement shows up as an arriving leader instead of in the prison. Marriage candidates get placed on the wedding table. I probably should take them off there. Naval leaders eliminated from play are brought back at this time. That feels weird. Like these are named people. But when an army leader gets eliminated, as it were, like, I don't know. They just go off on the track. Like, leaders don't die. I guess the idea being someone else would replace them or whatever, but they only die from this. It feels weird. On turn 4, the Tlemcen Berbers, I want to call them brothers. It looked like brothers to me. My eyes don't read all the time. Place the units specified over in a different special rule onto the map and add the units to the North African force pool. You know, when they're talking about add to the force pool, I really actually think that these are these. Except that they have no militia. Because this is all the North African force pool. And I don't have any other pieces of that color. Like, or at all. Unless they're tans, and they're not. Yeah, I think they're the bowmen. Which is really weird, because these are Ottomans. I don't know. I don't fucking know. And are also bowmen. All Berber spaces come into play as home spaces for North Africa. Algiers becomes an independent space until the Algiers Regency occurs. Everybody gets up to 2 fortresses on their map to place new ones. The Mesta marker is randomly placed. You don't get to choose. And you're going to have to connect that to ports. So that's like where your sheep production is heaviest or something. New cards get added to the deck. Nothing exciting there. I don't want to go into all the details. And you replenish the resources. Okay. The negotiations rules, the diplomacy. See, I know Raid's not done with what it's doing right now, but it's really kind of a pain because I've got to do a bunch of things as soon as it's done doing, because it's this stupid boss that, like, you need certain gear on everyone or you can't do it, period. And right now it's a free gear change period, so, like, I don't know, just horrible. I hate the game. Okay. The first segment is the negotiation segment, where you're able to make deals in private, and you may reveal cards or resources in your hand. You can make a limited set of agreements that alter the position of units. You can also make a non-binding, enforceable, whatever agreements about the game in general, because you're able to talk in private. Or you can discuss the football game. Okay. You can agree to end a war you're fighting. This will remove the at-war marker from the appropriate box. But the Portuguese can't have the Beltranejos make peace with Castile. The word is unfamiliar, so it kind of stumbles out. The French player can never have Catalonia make peace with Aragon. 2 players may form an alliance for 1 turn, and that'll be flipping the ally marker, but not if they're currently at war and are not agreeing to end that war. A power entering an alliance may loan their power's naval squadrons to the other power of the same alliance. Sounds like only two powers in an alliance. For 1 turn. Neither minor power squadrons nor naval leaders may be lent, however. A captured army leader may be returned. Place the army leader at the home key as possible. Like I said, you can cut a deal to get these removed. A power may yield political control of spaces it controls to another major power. Any units occupying these spaces are displaced. You can only grant a space if one of the following conditions is true. The space is given back to its home power. The space is in Castile and is being exchanged between Castile and Portugal, either direction, but not with the Beltranejos. The space is in Aragon and is being exchanged between Aragon and France, either direction. The space is an independent space. The space is in Navarre and is exchanged between France and Spain. The space is in Italy, is not of a minor ally, and is exchanged in any direction between two of these three powers, Aragon, Muslim, and France. A player may agree to give another player up to 2 random card draws from their hand. Such a card must be chosen at random. You cannot exchange specified cards. 2 players may not give each other card draws in the same turn. Such an exchange can only happen in one direction. Home cards and papal are ignored for this. A player may agree to give another player up to 2 randomly drawn resources using the same rules as drawing cards, but I believe you can trade resources for cards or something like that. I don't know what advantage there is to that. But 2 players may agree that the die will not be rolled for possible benefits from a specified captured leader. I'm not sure why you do this, because I don't think they come from the person. Like, I don't think they come from the captive's owner, but maybe I'm mistaken. 2 players may agree to return or exchange nous, which I find out are bigger caracs. So maybe they're like caravels in Conquistador. I don't know. And naval squadrons of the opponent that they've captured. A player may cede to another player up to 2 levels of diplomatic influence over any minor power not allied to the granting player. This means 1 level on 2 different minor powers, or 2 levels on a single. Lower your own influence marker when ceding levels, and then receiver raises his level a corresponding amount. 2 powers that are not at war may agree to trade up to 3 militia. 2 powers may not give each other militia in the same turn. Such an exchange can only occur in one direction. And that's important because, I mean, the cards thing would just be weird to trade cards with each other. Like, I guess, hopes that you draw cool stuff from, I don't know. But the militia could really be misused in terms of repositioning your forces. But let's keep going here. The power granting the militia removes the specified number from any single space. The power receiving them then takes the equivalent number and distributes them as desired among his home keys or home strategic spaces, as long as each space chosen is free of unrest, controlled by the receiving power, and meets the stacking limits during a winter phase. Players should agree on a time limit for negotiation. And they suggest 10 minutes. Okay, when the time limit is reached, each player in impulse order declares any agreements made with his powers which will result in a change in the game state. The announcements can be made as individual terms or as a group of agreements that need to be ratified together. All the powers involved in the agreement that follow later in the impulse at that point must confirm all the contents of any given declaration when it's their turn in the impulse order. If they do not confirm the full deal, none of the items in the agreement take effect. This is going to be cumbersome as hell, especially playing solo. I'm probably going to allow people to confirm immediately, but I can see why it's done this way. I don't like the effect on play. Of course, if you write all agreements down, that would be workable. If the agreement is confirmed by all parties, the players immediately change the game state by updating the diplomatic status, returning military leaders nous and naval squadrons captured, loaning out fleets, changing political control of spaces, and randomly drawing cards of resources. The reason it could affect play, right, is, let's say we're going in this order, and Spain has a deal with France, and France and the Muslims have a certain deal, and one deal might affect the other. They might actually include the same stuff, right? So Spain makes its offer. If France immediately has to respond to that, then the Muslims know a little bit more than they would if they have other deals pending and whatnot, right? And they could choose not to make their offer based on an immediate French reaction or whatever. I guess. I don't know. Anyway. I don't expect that my diplomacy is going to be that complicated where that's going to come into play. So I'm going to just wing that. Now some naval squadrons captured, loaning off fleets, changing political control. Okay, all the stuff, the game state stuff is what is affected there. Each agreement included an announcement must be possible at the time it's declared. You may make more announcements that can possibly be accepted, though. And like I said, it could be the same pieces. Like Spain could be offering militia to the Muslims and to the French, and they might be the same militia pieces, and only one side could get them. Conditional announcements, ones where you place a caveat on whether or not an agreement goes through based on a diplomatic action, are not permitted in any form. That's not to say you can't make such conditions privately. They just have no effect on this mechanism. Non-binding agreements, here we go. The only portion of an agreement that is binding is the changes to the game state, since items such as diplomatic action on a future turn or a promised card play or a coordinated movement of troops cannot be executed at this time. They do not change the game state and are non-binding. They can be made at any time between players, but are not announced. Alliances. Alliances are agreements between two major powers to cooperate for a turn. Alliances must be announced by all players involved at the end of the negotiation segment. Remember, there's some of the game state things that you announce here. One of them is alliances, so it would be triggered the same way. Alliances do not need to be made by two powers controlled by the same player. Those powers are always assumed to be allied. An alliance may not be created if the two powers are currently at war, even if it's only a war at sea. An alliance of Portugal, Spain, or France with the Muslim player prevents these Christian powers from allying with the papacy unless those Christian powers take control of Rome militarily. Maybe this is the thing I'm thinking of. Moreover, if any of these powers were allied with the papacy, the minor power is immediately deactivated when their alliance with the Muslim player comes into effect. Okay. The Beltranejos is automatically allied with Portugal until the signing of the Peace of Alcasovas, after which they can no longer ally. The Beltranejos faction is automatically allied with France if Portugal and France... By the way, this stuff, I'm not counting this in the 1/3 of the rules that are special cases, right? These are base rules and the effect of the special cases on them. So they're just being repeated, which is some of the bulk. Probably the rules are closer to 50-50 if you were to pull out all the special case stuff. Castile and Aragon have a joint foreign policy, so an alliance with one of those powers applies to the other. Beltranejos is allied with France if Portugal and France are allied prior to the signing of the Peace of Alcasovas. France can ally with Portugal or Spain, but not with both in the same turn. The Principality of Catalonia can only be allied with France. How are you supposed to remember all this stuff, you know? I mean, multiple playthroughs. The only way this is all going to sink in. Are you going to play a game that has a huge barrier that requires multiple plays to, like, start to understand it? Maybe, maybe not. Again, it depends what the payoff is. For EU, yeah, I was willing to. For a CDG, no, it's just not what I expect from a CDG, right? But we're going to give it a shot. Effects of alliance: spaces controlled by either power become friendly to both powers. That means land units may enter spaces controlled by their ally during movement and retreat. Naval squadrons other than Corsairs and Naus may be loaned to an ally for one turn, subject to the following conditions. Portugal and Spain cannot lend each other naval squadrons while the Peace of Alcasovas is in effect, as they are under a state of war at sea. Naval squadrons currently on the exploration map. Naval leaders and naval squadrons of allied miners cannot be lent. Naval squadrons may be lent between major powers controlled by the same power in order to move squadrons to a controlled port of the receiving power. The loan must be announced at the same time as an alliance. They cannot be loaned later at turn. Two players may not loan each other naval units in the same turn. I smell repetition here. Again, something, to some extent, repetition is really useful. Not so much when it's in bulk paragraphs. To some extent, it makes your eyes glaze over. Because you're like, oh, read this, you know. You move the loaned unit to the nearest port controlled by the receiving power, counting each sea zone traversed as one space. Okay. It's treated like any other naval squadron of the receiving power. Why does it matter that I'm counting? I don't know. The naval squadrons stacked in a single port do not have to be loaned out as a complete group. If a stack of land units from... God, my throat is going now. And we're not through this. This phase is big. We'll stop at the end of the boats. If a stack of land units from two major powers is attacked, they combine their units and army leaders into one defensive force. Either power can retreat their units from the space, with each power making separate avoid battle rolls. If units from... I have to lower my voice. I can't keep talking at the volume. If units from two major powers defend together, battle and assault losses are split evenly between the powers until a power is eliminated. Roll randomly to see who suffers any odd loss. This equal split of casualties also applies in field battle, not assault, to attacking units whose formations contains units from the two powers allied to the same player. Blah, 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 blah. Add an allied marker to the space that serves as a cross-reference between these powers on the diplomatic status display. That's over here, not a space on the board. Yeah, okay. This will allow them to do stuff. Multi-power formations can be formed as per 5.0 by... Hey, more special rules. The Great Captain between Aragon and Castile, Ferdinand between Aragon and Castile, Anjou between France and Catalans, any Nasrid leader between the North African and Nasrid, and Alfonso V between Beltran-Nejos and the Portuguese. Furthermore, alliances do not create a new state of war. Now, this is weird, right? Beltran-Nejos and the Portuguese are a major power. Oh, as per 5.0. Okay. What did 5.0 tell us? Yeah, so I think you can't create a formation for major powers otherwise. There doesn't seem to be any exception there. No, here we go. Army leaders and sea formations may not include units from two different major powers. Okay, but these are the exceptions, and they're being repeated here. Alliances do not create a new state of war with any third-party power. Power does not add an at-war marker with the new... However, as described above, all allied units will add to defense in a space. So it is possible to fight against somebody you're not at war with if they're allied with someone else, and stacking with them is basically what it comes to. And I'm done. I can't keep going. Probably the end for this week. Might make it on, the chances of me making it here on either today or on Saturday are low. Today a little bit more likely, Saturday almost none. So, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday, whatever. This game is just a nightmare to me, and I like the rule book. I don't know if it's intimidating me, but it's discouraging the hell out of me. And it's not because the rules are terribly written or anything. It's just there's so much, and I know it's not going to stick no matter what. Before it's still Friday. It's still gray as hell, but it's not supposed to rain until tomorrow. Yes, I'm griping a lot, But, you know, in addition to all the other stuff, they've made the core system more complicated with the addition of things like these resource counters and stuff like that. Yeah, Virgin Queen had them too, but there's more of them now. And Virgin Queen was not in the good place either for me. Anyway, I'm looking at, you know, this ransoming of captured leaders and the weirdnesses that go on that aren't even intuitive about it. Okay. So you can regain a captured army leader through a non-negotiated means. You choose whether to pay a resource or a card from your hand. If it's a resource, it's randomly selected. If it's a card, it comes from the hand and gives the player receiving and gives it to the player paying the ransom selects a card, not at random, and gives it to the player receiving the ransom. So if you give a card, you're going to give the shittiest. But if you give a ransom, it could be something. If you give a resource, it could be something decent. Put the army leader back on a controlled home key. Any number of leaders can be ransomed in this segment. However, there's never any requirement to ransom an army leader. A power may choose to let him remain and rot. But if he's still captured at the end of the segment, the capturing player has an option to roll a die for each leader to see if he gets any extra benefit. The two players involved may want to discuss whether or not to make this roll during negotiations. Add the captive rating leader's battle rating to the roll. If it's a 5 or a 6, you can draw a resource from the resource pool. Here's the other side of it. Or place unrest markers on up to 3 home spaces of the power belonging to the leader. That second part makes some sense. I'm just not buying that, like, having somebody in your prison system particularly is beneficial to you. Yeah, I don't know. They give a designer note, the space is entering unrest or unhappiness, the leader has not been rescued. Okay, that's a believable thing. What about the thing that I don't get at all? Like, I can't come up with an idea of why you're doing that. Yeah, that's weird. If the captured leader dies, hey, I just can't imagine. What are you doing? Selling his organs? I don't know. And if he's got a higher battle leader rating, he's got better organs? No, I just don't get it. If a captured leader dies due to a mandatory event, his power is removed from the game, or the leader is replaced by another leader, he's removed from the dungeon without further consequences, and additional rolls for the extra benefit are made in the victory determination phase. You wouldn't place unrest at this point. I'm not sure. That might actually, unrest might be able to cause victory point loss if it's on a key or something, or a strategic space. Declaration of war. You're allowed to declare war. Follow the DOW procedure. Feels like it should be a pretty simple thing. You're now at war. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of rules for it, for something that sounds pretty easy. You announce which of your powers declare war on one or more major powers. For each such declaration, you add an at-war marker on the diplomatic display over there. These powers are not now at war. Okay. If one of the powers controlled by the Muslim player is targeted by a DOW, the Muslim player may disguise to include his other major power in the war for free. The power that declared war is now at war with both. This option is not available with the automatic declaration caused by the event Muli Hassan seizes Zahara. If a Muslim power declares more special rules that don't count against that 1/3 of the game, right? of the game rules. If a Muslim power declares war during the war segment or with the Holy War event, the Muslim power may choose to do so for both of his powers. Castile and Aragon have a joint foreign policy, so a war declaration for one is both. Players can announce whether they wish to declare war on one or more minor powers. Special case. Ooh, this game is full of them. If everything that was a special case was highlighted like this, it would be a color mess. If a Muslim player declaring war on Navarre, the Muslim player may choose to do so with both of his powers, but the cost remains 3. Okay. Did the cost increase from the other one? I don't see it here. Is this some kind of indication that the Muslim has to pay for both their declarations? Maybe. But that is not made clear up here. The special case maybe kind of does it. For each declaration add war marker to the appropriate box in the diplomatic status display. A declaration of war on a minor power other than the papacy triggers the resolution of that minor power's diplomatic status, possibly allowing a major power to intervene on behalf. See step 4 over here. Finally, unless this minor is the papacy, remove the declaring power's influence marker from this minor's column. The player may not influence this minor power for the rest of the game. Which feels a little extreme, just because of the length of time that the game it covers. It's covering 46 years. Alliances shift within that kind of period. They may not as much in this era, but it does feel a little weird. Maybe if there were cards that allowed you to recover your position on the diplomatic influence table. Pay costs. The player now computes. Okay, so this is going to explain this special case. The player now computes the total CP cost for his declarations he made in step 1 or 2. The cost for each declaration is found by cross-referencing the 2 powers and looking at the number found. This cost varies between Portugal and Castile depending on a number of events. In the case of more than one power of the same player has declared war on a single, only the higher cost, if any, must be paid. Okay. So we look at the diplomatic status chart, which is this one. And I'm guessing the cost to declare war is this number. Not really clear, but it is because of this special case here. Now, I guess if you're at war or allied, you're permanently in that state if it's written on the card. So that's not going to be an issue. But I think it's possible to declare war on the papacy. Maybe they have a special rule with no number in there. But yeah, you'd pay this cost. Now let's look at the Navarre and North Africans and the special case. If the Muslim declares war on Navarre, Navarre is here. There's a 3 and an asterisk. Only if your influence on Navarre is at least 2 levels below another player's marker. Okay, that's not affecting this. So I don't see that this is a special case because you only pay the higher. That higher is 3. What? Yeah, I don't know. This power must play 1 or more cards or resources from his hand with a CP value that's equal or greater than the total CP expenditure. Those cards and resources are placed in the proper discard pile as if they had been played for CP in the action phase. Home cards and mandatory events may not be used to declare war. Feels a little weird, not the mandatories, but the home cards. Feels like you should have that option. They are just CPs. It's a little weird to me, but I don't know. If the war preparations card is played, it covers the cost of all wars without having to use other cards or resources. Okay. I'm sure the card tells you that. Intervention on behalf of a minor power. If 1 or more war declaration were declared at a minor power, resolve the diplomatic status. Another rule quite far away, not in the diplomacy section, okay, for each minor power. If more than 1 minor power was the target of a declaration, the order of resolution is chosen by the active player. Okay, I guess. I don't know the order of play for these. Like negotiations is simultaneous. I don't remember active player being defined, okay? There are certain places where there is a differential. Here, for example, but I guess segments are done in player order. I don't know how player order is determined. I think it's determined by the headline events. That feels like it would be the thing that does it, but I don't remember any discussion that told me about that. There's no place where you put player order, and I have not seen any indication of anything yet that tells me about that. Very interesting. You'd think you'd be setting player order. This is, a fairly deep game. How is there an active player if this isn't simultaneous or something? For the next player in impulse order, is there an index? There is not. Maybe on the other rule book, but I don't have that up here because I'm hoping to get through the historical events. Although, fucking newspaper, I got 2 newspapers delivered. I guess Christmas gift, whatever, convince you to subscribe. I don't know. I'm looking for headline event. I'm not seeing any rule on it. Maybe my eyes are bad. Normally it would be played here, but we haven't gotten to the spring phase yet, so maybe later on it tells us what the order of play is. For some reason, but that would mean that there's no order of play determined yet, right? Because diplomacy comes before the headline. Maybe there's a sequence determined at the beginning of the game. Or something. I don't know. I really don't know. What's notable, though, is that over here where it talks about the headline event, it doesn't tell you that causes the sequence of play, the initiative effect. Now, impulses are in a different order in the action phase. And let's see. Oh boy, this is going to be painful. It's Muslim, Portugal, Spain, France. It's not going to be horrible, but things always start with the Muslim. Maybe that's the impulse order here. But again, that's not spelled out here. So I'm just at a loss. That's fair. I felt at a loss reading these rules the whole time. They're just too much chrome and not enough game underneath it. Is my feeling. Not enough that you can expect to be the same. Anyway, what happens? Remove the power declaring war and any power listed as deactivate power from those considered during this diplomatic status check. Any power listed as deactivate power. Well, I don't know what the fuck that means. And that's the thing. While I was reading it, I would put things on the back burner, but they'd fall off, because again, there's just so much here and no references for me to flip through and get used to where I'm going to look for that. Sometimes that can be helpful. The rule book's visual, other than where there's a lot of color, isn't too bad for a modern rule book at all. Remove the power declaring war and any power listed as deactivate from those. Yeah, I don't know what the deactivate power is. Like, if it's an event, it'll say on the event maybe, but otherwise, I have no idea. There doesn't seem to be anything about that here. Oh, wait. There's a deactivate here. Maybe that's what it means. Yeah, I think that's probably what it means, that they can't. I don't know. Okay. Oh, are we here? Something about this diplomatic status check. Okay. The player who wins the status check earns the right to intervene on behalf of the minor power. That player must choose one of these options. Intervene. The minor power becomes an ally of the player that won the diplomatic status check. That winning power is now at war with the major power that declared war on the minor. If units from those powers share a space, displace units. All units that are not in a space their power controls. That could be both people falling back from a space, conceivably. Isolation. The winning player declines the option to go to war with the power that declared it on the minor. The minor power remains inactive, facing the major power alone. This is fucked up and weird. My feeling is that if you roll, like, Empires in Arms, Empires in Arms and EU, and most games that have some kind of, do I want control of the minor for the war? If you're going to roll for it, you have to agree to enter the war in their support. And the opposite section is, well, what happens if nobody agrees to defend that minor? And then you have different rules for that, which might be using the same mechanism amongst the players who do not wish to defend, or the minor just surrenders, or something along those lines. Empires in Arms has the minor just surrenders, which is badly misused by some players, in my opinion. Although it could be looked at as a form of diplomacy. As a form of diplomacy on the minor. But it's a fucked up situation. Actually, maybe you do roll for it. Yeah, I think you do roll for control and then decide whether or not to support it, and you fuck it over completely in Empires in Arms. EU does not do that. If you don't step up and defend the minor, somebody who's willing to is chosen. So, yeah, all right, no matter which option is chosen, all players lose their diplomatic influence with the minor power. It's moved to the resolve this turn space, I believe. And it can't be checked again. Declaration of war. Okay, we're still on the declaration of war segment. Okay. As you can see, it's going to take fucking forever just to get through the non-special rules. Declaration of war during action phase and headline event. Sometimes two major powers are put in a state of war during the action phase. Home of Sultanate of Fez, Papal Bull, certain events cause it, basically. But activation of a minor power might bring that minor power into a war. Declaration of war by a Christian power against the papacy apparently happens at a different way than over here. And that's got its own special rule, but that's not the normal. Like, there's different types of different sections of special rule, and this is like the powers special rules or whatever. In any case, add an at-war marker to the diplomatic status. If naval units of the two powers are occupying the same sea zone, they fight an immediate naval battle with the power earlier in the impulse as the attacker. God, this is tiring me. There are several restrictions which apply to declarations of war. Some of those apply at all times. Others only apply to declarations made at the war segment of the diplomacy phase. You cannot declare war on a power whose box in the diplomatic status indicates NA or allied as the cost of war declaration. Okay? Those are ones that don't have a number on them, basically. A minor power that's allied to a major power, you have to declare war on the major power instead. A power, major or minor, that's currently your own ally, An independent space, as those spaces may be besieged or controlled without a need for a declaration of war. The Gonches, as they can be attacked without a declaration of war like independence. They don't have a space on there, so, you know. Navarre, unless the influence marker on Navarre of the player declaring war is at least 2 levels below another player's marker. The Beltranejos or Principality of Catalonia, these 2 factions are never allowed to declare war on another power. They're locked into their initial wars with Castile and Aragon, respectively. However, there are special cases described below in which you can attack units of these limited major powers even without being at war with them. Oh, goody, more special cases. The North African Alliance cannot declare war on the Spanish player if Mulli Hassan seizes Zamara has not yet been played. Wonderful. The Nasrid Kingdom in Spain may only go to war through play of a mandatory event. Mulli Hassan seizes Zahara. This state of war is permanent for the rest of the game. Exception, great. If any minor Muslim power conquers Rome before the mandatory event is played, it will trigger the mandatory play of this card. Draw it from the deck and execute it. If it's in the player's hand, it is now played, and that player draws another card from the deck. That doesn't really sound like an exception, but okay, whatever, you know. During diplomacy, you cannot declare war on a power that you've made peace with during the current diplomacy. A power you formed an alliance with during the current diplomacy. You can't declare war on a power that's allied, right? At any time. The North African Alliance cannot declare war on the Spanish player if it is the declaration of war phase in the second or third turn. I don't know what happens if an event forces you to declare war on an ally. It is possible. I'm hoping that the events specify that that doesn't matter, but whatever. Okay, let's keep going. Another set of special cases. Again, that 1/3 is just bullshit when I said that. That's the number of pages that are devoted only to special rules. It's beginning to look like half of the rest of the rule book is special cases. And I can't remember a fucking one of them because they keep shoving each other off the edge. In EU, I have to look up a couple of special cases every now and then. Beltranejos units, Catalan units, and also Morisco units, including Morisco rebellion militias after the surrender of the Nasrid Kingdom, oh good God, can be attacked by units of major powers other than Castile and Aragon under special circumstances, specified in this rule. Thanks. Even if they are not officially enemy units, since they're not at war, special rules also govern spaces these units may control and enter, especially when attacking. Oh, fuck, man. When are we going to be done with this fucking rule? France, Nasrid, and North Africans, if at war with Spain, may enter control spaces and attack Beltranejos units in Castilian and or Beltranejos. Yeah, my throat's going. All right, back down to being quiet. And or Beltranejos home spaces provided the Peace of Alcalvanes has been signed and therefore... I mean, I'm not going to fucking remember this. You're not going to remember it. Why am I reading them? You know? Why read the rules? In the same way, Beltranejos can enter control spaces and attack units of those powers exclusively in Beltranejos home spaces. Whatever. I don't even understand it now. Like, there's just so much fucking special case in this game that it's like I get so sick of it all that I can't even understand it when I'm reading it. Portugal, Nasrid, and North African, if at war with Spain, may enter control spaces and attack Catalan units in Aragonese and or Catalan home spaces. In the same way, Catalan units can enter control spaces and attack units of those powers exclusively in Catalan's home spaces. Portugal and France, if at war with North Africans and the Nasrid, does not exist because it has surrendered, may enter control spaces and attack Moriscos, including Moorish rebel militias after the surrender of the Nasrid Kingdom, in Castile or Nasrid spaces. In the same way, Moriscos can enter control spaces and attack units of those powers exclusively in Nasrid's home spaces. And I don't know if that's just original Nasrid home spaces or, well, I don't know if it is always Nasrid original home spaces or if it also includes home spaces that have been converted. not specified, might be in the special rule there, doubt it. I mean, you know, again, something like EU that's going to take you 60 hours and plus to play, makes sense to have a lot of these and a few of them active at any one time. This just feels like the whole game is filled with these that are constantly going to have to be checked. Beltranejos are only allowed to enter control spaces, attack Castilian and Aragonese units in Castilian and or if the piece of alcohol, if blah 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 blah. I'm done. I mean, we're not going to remember it, right? You know. There has to be a better way to give this kind of information. War between Castile and Portugal. The one exception to the declaration of war rules. No, not one. Okay? Just no. The game is full of fucking exceptions. The one exception to the long list of declaration of war and exception rules above is for declarations of war between Portugal and Castile. These two powers begin the period represented in Tanto... Oh yeah, let's print the whole game name out. As bitter enemies at war over the succession crown of Castile, but both powers ended up eventually signing blah blah blah. The decrease in tensions between those powers means the cost of declaration of war changes. In piece of blah, we're just going to say blah blah for anything. Sets the cost at 4, and then it goes up to 6 with Tordesillas, and I am done. And I'm fucking sick of reading these rules. It took me like 3 weeks, I think, you know, of trying to muddle through them on my own. I didn't learn a fucking thing, and now I'm reading them aloud, which usually helps settle them, and I'm still feeling them just fall right out of my brain as I read them. Here again, it's about an hour before raid time, and that just... I've gotten maybe 5 hours of sleep today. So confusing. But anyway, I figure I'll force myself through a little bit more of this. So the spring, and it doesn't help that I can't fit the whole rule book on the table. Part of it being, you know, there's counters and stuff over here, and my table's a little too thin. But yeah, I'm not used to being this unhappy doing the rolls. Like, really, really bad rolls, I can complain about lots of stuff, and that helps a little bit. Here, the only thing I can really, really complain about for the most part is that these don't sink in and that the game is overburdened. And, you know. All right. The spring phase first opens up with, okay, here it says, in each segment, each player in impulse order. Impulse order, I really don't think, I'm wondering, is there definitions? Like, I just don't remember this being defined ever. Is the one section called the impulse? It's called the action phase. And they give an order here. I don't know of any time when they've defined impulse order, okay? And they're saying you do this in impulse order. Now, further, here's a problem. It's not. Here it says, in each segment, each player in impulse order completes all the steps. Well, in each segment, okay. I was going to say, because there's the headline events. Maybe this determines impulse order. That would make sense. Each player secretly chooses a home card, mandatory event, or normal event card from their hand to attempt to have that event executed in this segment. Attempt to have it executed. Each player then chooses a second card, which cannot be a mandatory event, to support the first card with its CP value. All cards are revealed simultaneously, and the headline event submissions are ranked in order from highest CP value of the supporting card to the lowest. In case of a tie, the player with less victory points goes first. And if there's still a tie, the player earlier in impulse order goes first. Again, impulse order, wow, man, it's not defined. I swear. Each such card play is called an impulse. Players use the final... So, I'm thinking that it's got to be the action phase order. By linking a couple of things together, which is that here they say each such card play is called an impulse. This is the only time so far in the rules that word has been used outside of where it refers to impulse order in places. And then it says players take impulses in this order under the action phase. So I guess it's just a fixed card play order. Okay. Okay. All cards are revealed simultaneously, and the headline submissions are ranked in order. In this case of a tie, the player earlier in the order is placed first. The players then receive the following benefits in ranked order. Treat this segment as a normal impulse. First place gains a victory point for the headline event, and there are lots of counters for these. Again, they just collect up, right? Second place, roll a die. If it's a 5 or higher, gain a victory point. After rolling the die, a player may sacrifice points from their ruler's admin for this turn to improve their die roll. Each point they subtract from their admin rating adds 1 pip to their roll as they attempt to reach a 5. A ruler's admin can never be reduced below 0, then execute your selected event. This one also says then execute your selected event. So you've got a capacity to trade away. Admin is the number of cards you can hold each turn. Cards that you hold at the end of the turn for victory points. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me in general. Third place, you get your selected event gone. Fourth place, do not execute your selected event. However, you may move any player's influence marker on a minor power up or down 1 space on the diplomatic table. All cards selected by the players are discarded. If any executed headline event indicates that it is removed when played, remove the card instead. Okay, so any headline event that's one time for fourth place would still go into the discard pile. These can never be canceled or affected by any other card. However, if through the use of CPs in the event movements are made or combat generated, combat or response cards that affect movement, interception, avoid battle, or combat may be used. Then naval escort segment. Now this is going to be a period where you're preparing for the upcoming turn, even though you got to just play a card. Okay. Each power with an explored ocean zone may move 1 naval squadron from a home port on the main map to one of the ocean zones they have explored. Alternatively, they may return 1 squadron in an ocean zone to a home port on the main map. In either case, this move is made without needing to make any navigation check. Troop deployment. All major powers with a home key under their control may move a single formation from one of these keys to a friendly controlled space. This doesn't cost you anything, but it has a bunch of restrictions. Only land units and army units that start this phase at a home key can use it. The power must be able to trace a path of any length from the key the formation occupies to the destination space. All land spaces on the path must be friendly controlled, and no land spaces on the path may be in unrest nor contain a plague marker. The path may cross one C-zone only following a path of one friendly controlled port on that C-zone to another. You give me a list of things like this, and this is, when I'm talking about procedural type rules, it really doesn't stick, but nothing's sticking anyway, so who the fuck cares? It's worse than the rest of it, but the destination space cannot contain enemy units. I mean, how many things have this many, restrictions, exceptions spelled out like this? It's just, yeah. The number of land units in a formation is limited by the command rating of any army leaders present. And I'm wondering if it's a thing having to do with the bubble map. The fact that it's point-to-point instead of, that the game is point-to-point instead of some sort of hex game. But, for some kind of redeployment like this, I don't know. It just feels like trace something. I don't know. The number of land units in the formation is limited by the command rating of any army leaders present. You cannot cross a pass. The path may not enter a space containing units from another power unless all units in that space are friendly to the deploying power. No more than 5 land units may cross a C-zone during a spring deployment. If another major power has naval squadrons that have not been lent in ports that border the C-zone being crossed, the path is blocked if either of these is true. And now we go to sub-points. If this or other major power is at war with the deploying power, or if the deploying power does not have one of his own squadrons either in the C-zone or in a port adjacent to the C-zone. I mean, it's just, I think this is the most effective way to get the information across, honestly. It feels more like the kind of information that's being forced to happen, to be provided here, is the problem. And I just feel like there's something wrong in the initial design. I don't know. I mean, something like this might not be a problem if there wasn't so much else that followed this kind of visual, war preparations, normal event, the rise of France home card, and the crown of Aragon. Yeah, let's list every fucking card that does this. Allow some of these restrictions to be ignored. Units from different powers that start the phase stacked with a leader that can command units from multiple powers. The words aren't even registering. May move together with that leader for one of the powers deployments, players deployments, spring deployments. Now, the important thing, it's all major powers, okay, not each player. Multiple power leaders can move together with a leader for one of that player's deployments, string deployments with a formation, blah, blah, blah. Containing units from more than one power are considered as the spring deployments of the power owning. Okay, I don't fucking care. All right, let's get the action phase. This is the meat of the game. Oh, look, it doesn't take up any room. It's the heart of a CDG, right? Everybody knows it and everything at this point, but yeah, they're going to describe that in almost nothing. Whereas, I just don't know. I want to walk away at this point. I really do. I'm not capable of coping. I know this is going to be easy. Okay, let's just do this because this is going to be easy. I mean, I've explained it already. During the action phase, the players take impulses in order described in section 3.1. Okay, 3.1. Is that where I was looking? That's all I want to know. 3.1. There we go. Impulse order is defined somewhere properly. And it just, like I said, nothing is fucking sticking with these rules in my head. So it's like, but I swear I looked for that again and again. Did I see what I was looking for? No, because I was looking for impulse order, not player. It's defined within, it should be in a glossary, or it should be somewhere where I can just look it up when I keep reading the rules and looking for impulse order. Finally, though, we have a rules reference to what it is. And that allowed me to find it when I couldn't find it paging through. The power initiating an activity is referred to as the active power. Each impulse consists of one of the following three activities. Play a card for command points, play a card for an event if the card has an event, passing if the stars are right. Oh, Cthulhu. Unless the power passed, he can then extend his impulse by playing a resource. Spanish and French, special rules. Okay. Playing a card for command points. All cards except mandatory event cards can be played for CPs during an impulse. When played for and mandatory events look like they can be, but they just provide extra points. Those points in the shield are just extra. When played for CP, the card provides a number of CPs equal to the number in the shield. These are then expended to perform one of the actions listed on your player card, most of which are pretty much the same. Again, I think the only differential is if you have any purple on your card. And there are some special cases written into the costs. Yeah. Where are we? You expend them to do shit. The card is then placed in the discard pile and will be used again in future turns. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's not placed in the discard pile. Maybe it's placed on your player card. But, yeah. Play a card as an event. Mandatory event cards, home cards, normal event cards, and response cards, but never combat, can be played as events during a player's impulse. Some events can only be played by powers specified on the card or if certain conditions have been met. Read the printed effects on the card and execute them immediately. Note some home and normal event cards and all mandatory event cards award CPs that can be used with the event. These CPs are spent to perform any of the actions listed on the power card. After being played as an event, the card is placed on the discard pile unless the card states removed from deck. Such cards are permanently removed from the game. You may play an event that directs another power to take an action. In this case, the player listed on the card resolves the action, not the active player. Late in the action phase, I can't even speak. Powers may pass. She shall shine a seashore. For their impulse. Players may never pass if they have the home card or papal bull in their hand, a mandatory event that's not yet been played. Well, if it's in their hand, it hasn't yet been played. Okay. You know. They have more cards in their hand than their ruler's admin rating, i.e. you wouldn't be able to stop to hold your cards. You must pass if you have no cards left in your hand. If you're holding one or more cards that pass during an impulse, you do not have to continue to pass. You may play one of these held cards on your turn for the impulse arises. The action impulse is over when all players have passed in consecutive impulses. Okay, now here's what's weird. Those resources, they're not like cards. They seem to only have one, the ones with CPs on them, they seem to only have one possibility, which is extending an impulse with a resource. Although there may be other times when you can spend them, like for declaring war and stuff now. But it's like, to me it feels like they should be like cards, and they and cards should be able to be played interchangeably, but they're just not. A player with a resource in his warehouse who has played a card may now extend the impulse by playing one of those resources. Resources listing a CP value from 2 to 5 allow a player to perform actions just as if they were playing a card for CP. No, it doesn't. Right? Because nowhere does it say, I don't even know, right? You're contradicting to me. Like, here I have to play a card. Okay, what does this say? This is under a rule called extending the impulse with a resource. So I would think that's all that applies here. And it says that if I have a resource and I've played a card, I can extend the impulse by playing one of those resources. But then here it says it allows a player to perform actions just as if they were playing a card for CP. Which, okay, I'm guessing you can still only do this within the resource, the extension. Additionally, the Spanish player can extend the impulse by moving a leader to the Canaries or by rolling on the Mesta table in the case indicated on the War of Brittany. Okay, I'm sure we'll find those rules somewhere else. The French player can extend the impulse to sign the Treaty of Barcelona and or the Treaty of Senlis. Again, how, do you get points from this something? I don't know. We have an example. What? We have a limitation. If the player used any card other than a home card or mandatory event for CP value during the first part of his impulse, remember which action she chose during this card play. Then if any of these actions are repeated when CP are expended from the resource, the cost of each repeated action is 1 additional CP. Fucking weird. Why put these complications in here? I mean, the game feels so abstract and everything. It's like there's these fucking weird restrictions being put in place that have no link to any kind of like intuitive purpose. And it just feels like complexity for complexity's sake. I don't understand why it's here. Okay, and you can make arguments. Well, you don't want people running across the map so quickly, or moving lots of units, or I don't know, like that the 6 points on a card is more or less the limit that a country could do by devoting themselves to one action. But I guess and then I'm trying to think, but then why is if a player used any card other than a home card or mandatory event for its CP value? So, again, I don't know what that means. Like, if I use the home card for its pure CP value, somehow, even though those are very highly valued cards, I'm not penalized? And the mandatory events, they just give you a CP value. Maybe some of the home cards do too, and I don't know what that, how that plays in differently. And then here we have an example. A player plays a 3 CP card at the beginning of his impulse. He builds a Castilian naval squadron in Corunna for 2 CPs and spends 1 to raise his diplomatic influence. He then extends his impulse with a 4 CP resource. If he builds a naval squadron, it'll cost him 3 instead of the normal 2. If he tries to raise diplomatic influence, it'll cost him an additional CP for each action. All right, I don't know. Each action in the game costs from 1 to 4. Exact rules for the execution of each action are found throughout sections 12 through 20. The rest of the main rules. Some of the actions cost a variable number of CPs, e.g. the wedding dowry. CPs are spent on one. And so what that basically means is that there are 9 basic actions in the game. And it looks like there's more than that. But some of them are like recruit troops and stuff like that, which having multiple lines to them. So, yeah, I guess it's about right. Where the fuck am I? CPs are spent on one action at a time. The action is then executed to completion before any remaining CPs are spent. CPs may not be accumulated from one impulse to another. They must be spent or discarded in the impulse in which the card provided them is played. You can choose to execute the same action back-to-back within an impulse. This is very common with movement actions. Some units can move multiple spaces. It is also common when constructing units or placing CP to buy diplomatic influence. And that's it for now. Do I break this into, it was going to be 3 different intro sections. I'm thinking 4 is going to be necessary at the pace I'm going. So I'm going to load this thing up as part B, because I know people are tired. People are waiting for these rules to come out. At least one person is like, I can't wait for them to come out. What? Why? It's an unmemorable mess when it makes it into my mind, at least. The only way to start to learn this thing is to move pieces around. And then what it's going to come down to is the special rules that you look up during play and that you remember, they'll stick. The ones that you didn't look up, there's going to be ones that are just going to hide from you, and you may play full games of this without ever remembering that those rules exist, and you may ignore them. Just because you can't get it all in, well, I can't get it all in my fucking brain. All right, let's send this up as part B of the intro, and I guess we'll go for a 4-point intro.